Hello everybody, it's 9 o'clock, it's Wednesday, that means it must be time for... Oh, hang on, what's this? Oh, do you recognise this sound? I believe, bang that on the microphone, I found an audio cassette. It doesn't have a label on it though. I'll just tighten it up with this pencil and I'll pop it in this player just here. Right, hang on. Right, yeah, let's see if I can remember this. It's load, and then speech mark, enter, flash and blue, flash and red, yeah. Oh, and yeah, push play. Here we go. Oh, shit. It's a Mastertronic game. That's going to be terrible. It's going to be re-released by Hit Squad or something on Ricochet label. No, of course I jest. That was just our little fitting tribute to the 30th birthday of the Spectrum. Obviously, if it was a really fitting tribute, that would have crashed halfway through. I'd taken the tape out, thrown it across the room, and just watched an episode of Dizzy Heights Hotel or something. So, yes, hello and welcome to episode 2 officially of the Holocaust. And here's our lovely intro. Thanks for joining us.
Once upon a time, not so long ago, there was a little girl, and her name was Emily. And she read a blog. There it is. It was rather a usual blog because it didn't write anything. You see, everything in that blog's page was a link that somebody had once posted and Emily had found and mailed on to Bouncy. Emily's cat, Bouncy. The most important, the most beautiful, the most magical, saggy old internet troll in the whole wide world. Well now, one day Emily found a link, and she brought it back to the blog, and she mailed it to Bouncy, who was asleep in his pants as usual. But then Emily said some magic words. Bouncy, dear Bouncy, old fat furry noncy, wake up and look at this link that I bring. Wake up, be bright, spout venom and shite. Bouncy, oh hear what I sing.
Yes, and with that yawn, we officially commence episode 2 of Holocaust in your lug holes. Good evening, I am Bouncy Ball. It is live on 25th of April 2012. To prove it is live, I will say quack, the universal sound of live television and radio and pervy women on the internet. Good evening, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure. An absolute pleasure to have you here with us this evening. I do hope, sincerely hope, I don't say anything to offend either of you, but you know, I may do anyway. So, what are we talking about today? Last week we talked about Kinect. It was top of the line. It was up to date. It was all this fancy new technology. Today we're talking about board games. Not just any board games, though. We're not going to be talking about Monopoly, for a starter. Everybody on Twitter that suggested Monopoly, you are clearly the sort of child that wanted pencils and colouring books for your Christmas presents, and that's why you didn't have any friends. Nobody likes Monopoly unless they're either really, really sad or a maniacal evil genius in the making who just wants to plot world domination. Now, I suppose if you're in that second category, that's acceptable. But have a word with yourself. So no, we're talking about good old games. We're talking about games like Mr. Pop. We're talking about games like Mousetrap. We're talking about games that had 150 separate plastic pieces and you never lost a single one. No, nobody in the 80s lost their counters. You could have a game and you'd have all the pieces. My kids, I buy them something, they can open the box, 5 seconds later something's gone missing. Sometimes I'm not even sure that box had the piece in the first place because it's shoddily been made in some factory in Taiwan by some children that have been blinded by capitalism. So, off we go with the rants already. I tried to talk about something nice and talk about blind children already. So no, we're talking about good old games like that. We had some great suggestions on Twitter. Somebody liked Perfection. That was my wife, actually. Liked Perfection, which was the game where you had to put the little tiny shapes inside a board before it popped up in the air, thus ruining everything. I don't really see the interest in that. We did buy a copy for her recently. We played it a couple of times, and she loves it still. But for me, if I'm going to play a game that's popping up, it's going to be Mr. Pop. It's going to be a man where I can stick glasses and a moustache on it and then catapult pieces of face at my sister. That was what made a good game. If your sister could be upset, it was a good game. Another game I absolutely adored as a child, and I had to look this up on the internet because, sometimes when you have a memory and you're convinced that you've kind of made it up, you're convinced it's not quite legit. I had Back to the Future board game, and it was amazing. It was the mid-80s, and I was convinced that I had a car, and I had to go around the board. I had to collect that kind of lightning rod conductor thing that would send the lightning bolt into the flux capacitor. That's it, into the flux capacitor, and then you could go around and you go past clock tower, and then that would be the end of the game. You'd be back in the future. A lot of searching on the internet, looking around, like no, it's there was a board game, but it looked nothing like the one I had. So I kept looking. I couldn't work out how my parents had managed to buy me for Christmas, no less, a board game when I lived in a small farming village, and this board game didn't exist. I almost got around to thinking, did I just make it out of paper because I wasn't allowed to have a proper board game of Back to the Future, and then realised I hadn't seen Back to the Future at the time of getting the board game. My dad rented it, and we watched it before playing the game. So, yeah, looking around, randomly, and this is a genuinely true story, looking on Google search, and I have this thing for old crisp packets. And this guy was holding up a packet of Smith's crisps from about 85, 86. And on the front, it said something along the lines of, collect for amazing Back to the Future game. And I got to thinking, hang on. Did my parents save up some crisp packets, send off for the present, and then give it to me for Christmas? A free promotional board game that actually, the reason why I remember making the cars out of paper was because it probably just came in an envelope in the post and cost about 10p to make, which is brilliant. I mean, if I had that sort of logic, my kids would be constantly assembling small pieces of paper into a board game and enjoying it, instead of me going up to the toy shop and buying some kind of lead-painted crap. So, yeah. I had a Back to the Future game that was essentially free. It was given to me as a present, which I suppose didn't cost me anything, and I loved it, and nobody else can remember it. I also had a Batman the Movie board game that made no sense whatsoever. Tie-in games often don't. However, there was a tie-in game that did. That was Incredible Hulk Smash Up. Now, I'm hoping, in a way, none of you have heard of this game. If one of you has, I should be really pleased, because at least you can corroborate I'm not making this shit up. But essentially, it was Dizzy Dizzy Dinosaur with the Incredible Hulk in it. Only they realised that with Dizzy Dizzy Dinosaur, it wasn't as interesting because there was no real threat there. It was just a smiley dinosaur. This game, you played Dr. David Banner, Bruce Banner. David, where'd that come from? Bruce Banner, trying to assemble a machine lab thing that you could cure yourself of the Hulk. But this is the best bit. As you move around the board, you do things that piss the Hulk off. And it basically, it'll be a different sliding scale of 1 to 5. 1 being relatively calm, probably just, I've just dropped my biscuit, has just broken off and gone in the bottom of my coffee. Number 5 being, I've just woken up and the cat's done a shit in my ear. And it depending on what it was, you revved him only that amount on this kind of sliding scale, and then put him on the board. And he'd spin around, they'd just charge off. That dangerous was the Incredible Hulk that the game even gave you a guardrail to protect the characters from the Hulk. He was only allowed to smash up what he was supposed to smash up, which sort of defeated the whole point of the Hulk, obviously. But I dare say that when they were testing it, he probably flew off the board, went straight through a supporting wall, and a bungalow collapsed in Chepstow. So, be aware, be mindful. Nobody really wants a bungalow collapsing because of a little toy Incredible Hulk. So yeah, that was brilliant. It was essentially Dizzy Dinosaur for people that wanted a bit more carnage. So yeah, that's all cool. Another game that a lot of people have been saying, is it a board game? Is it not a board game? I think the word board game can be quite general here. We're talking about games that you could play. Sometimes they'd have a board. But this one was Pop-Up Pirate. A lot of people saying, I love Pop-Up Pirate. Pop-Up Pirate is amazing. Pop-Up Pirate is my favourite game. I played Pop-Up Pirate once in the first 20 years of my life. And I can tell you exactly the circumstances surrounding that. I lived in a small village. On the corner, opposite me, was a bric-a-brac shop. And above it was like some loft space. And there were 2 girls that their mother owned or ran the bric-a-brac shop who had a copy of Pop-Up Pirate and were visiting the shop for the day and didn't have anybody else to play with. So I was invited up to the attic as like a 6-year-old who'd never played Pop-Up Pirate before to play Pop-Up Pirate. I didn't understand a bloody bit of it. It was the simplest of games. Genuinely, it's not rocket science. At that point, I could make an Airfix model and do it right and put all the transfers on correctly without sticking it to my hand. But Pop-Up Pirate, I just didn't understand the logic of why was I sticking swords, tiny swords, into a huge barrel that contained a tiny man. It was like, at no point was I questioning the reality of the situation. But yeah, it didn't make any sense. So yeah, it's sometimes I think that's just the way life goes, isn't it? Anyway, a quick promo, and then we're coming back for a little bit more talk about board games. So if you've got a favourite board game, drop it in on Twitter or get involved on the chat on Spreaker, and we'll see you right after this. Okay, let's see if I can find it right, because I got this wrong last week, so here we go. Enjoy this advert for a movie-related podcast.
Do you like films? Then tune in to the Monday Movie Show live on Spreaker.com every Monday at 7:30. Each week, your hosts Stuart and Andy review the latest cinema and home releases, as well as going over the latest movie news and the box office / Blu-ray and DVD top 10. For more information, visit the site www.mondaymovieshow.co.uk or follow us on Twitter at Monday Movie Show. And don't forget to download the podcast on iTunes. Just search for the Monday Movie Show.
Yes, do that. Do search for the Monday Movie Show. That's Andy and Stuart, who I play on Xbox Live with quite a lot, who got ideas above their station to start doing a movie-related weekly show, which is 2 shows, actually. One does a cinema, one does a DVD releases. So if you're into films, you could do a lot worse than listening to their show on a Monday night. And their website as well. They've got a genuinely great, full rundown of every live-action Marvel iteration, incarnation, however you want to put that. But yeah, they've got that running out there at the moment. So yeah, it's a good little podcast. Anyway, back to board games, because that's what you're all here for. Hero Quest. Who remembers Hero Quest? I remember Hero Quest. The sad thing about that, I remember Hero Quest, I always wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons, not as a nerdy point of view, but everybody else seemed to say it was the greatest thing if you're into that kind of thing. But I lived in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have anybody my own age with my sort of interest. I spent most of my time out with an air rifle, a bike, climbing trees, making dens, making forts, throwing clods of mud at rabbits, that kind of thing. So I didn't have a chance to have, a great big board game that I had to have other people. So I thought Hero Quest, it looks a bit like Dungeons & Dragons, but could be just 2 people. I don't have to have anything else. And I think I'd get my sister to play. I opened it. I was far too young for it. It was far too complicated for me. So I used my Airfix paints and painted all the characters and put them in with my Star Wars figures. And they were essentially like a tiny little army on this planet where all the Star Wars figures went and laughed because they didn't have adjustable joints, movable, posable joints, but they were tiny. So yeah, Hero Quest, it had great potential. I'm sure it's a really good game. Steve on the chat said his dad had that unopened in a box for over 20 years, and he thinks it still might have it untouched. So yeah, it's not just me. It's one of those games that you kind of look at it. It's a great big barbarian on the front, swinging a sword. It's an amazing looking box, amazing artwork. But no, sadly, and it wasn't even the bloke who played Wolf on Gladiators, like Barbarian the game. That would have been cool. Maria Whittaker on the front of that box. It'd have sold twice as many copies. Still wouldn't have got played, though. So yeah, here's another one. I'm going to pull this out. Ghost Castle. That's another one that somebody mentioned to me earlier today, Ghost Castle, which I adore. Ghost Castle, if you have never played it, essentially was a Scooby-Doo type situation with some kids going around a haunted house trying to get to the top of this tower to do something to do with a curse or stop a ghost from going rampaging in Sainsbury's or something. And every now and then you'd land on a square and you'd have to drop a skull that had like a ball bearing in it into the coffin at the top, and it would go down. And because it was unbalanced, it would go one of four ways, which would trigger a trap that could feasibly not kill, possibly maim, but essentially just send you back a few spaces. And so it'd be like a suit of armour would kick you in the head, or a skull of something would roll down the stairs and knock you over and stuff. So yeah, that was a really cool game that got re-released a couple of years ago. And I picked up a copy thinking, oh, this is exciting. It was shit in comparison to the original. So I then went out and got an original from a charity shop. And yeah, Rob McGregor on the live chat here says, I punched another kid in the face over Ghost Castle. I'd like him to expand upon that, and we'll come back to him in a moment. So my final game that I'm going to talk about is Lost Valley of the Dinosaurs. It's another large board kind of role-playing style action-adventure game in which you find out that there was a tribe of people who had a treasure and they used dinosaurs to protect it in a kind of Lost World style scenario. Again, another game I didn't really play properly. We made up our own rules, which I think is essential. You know, if you play a sandbox game on the Xbox, you can make up your own rules. That's what part of the fun was. This was a board game that had an erupting volcano, a lava flow, and a series of dinosaurs that you could move around and do what you want. And, may I add, a nesting pterodactyl that had an opening mouth that had a mouth just big enough to pick a bloke up by his own head and carry him around. So yeah, we reenacted the Land That Time Forgot quite a lot with that board game. Yeah, and there's another one on here somebody's mentioned, Test Match. I think they did a World Cup cricket as well. There was a couple. It was essentially like Subbuteo, but it was cricket, and it had like a bloke with a bit of guttering attached to his arm that you'd roll a ball down, and you had a little piece of string on a weighted cricket bat on a man, and you could hit it, and you positioned your fielders. It was actually more exciting than any game of cricket I've ever played since, and I've played it semi-professional. But yeah, a Test Match was, in my mind, better than Subbuteo, better than any sport-related thing, with the possible exception of that basketball game that had kind of drop-down sections that you could hit buttons and it would like ping the ball up, and then you had a net either side. I can't remember what that was called. If anybody knows what that is, there was a few games like it, but that was amazing. And just remembering another one. Come on, Nathan, think. It was another sport-related. Oh, Pop-A-Matic. That was it. That's hit the buttons. Yeah, Pop-A-Matic. That was like, for board games, that was a revelation. It was like you couldn't lose the dice because it was inside a dome. That when you pushed it down, it would ping up and shake the dice. And that was incredible. You get Ludo in the middle, and it was like you could just make a clicky noise that was really annoying. So that's what you want as a toy, you know. So yeah, there you go. We've had a good bit of chat. Rob hasn't expanded on why he punched another kid in the face over Ghost Castle, so I can only assume he lost. So yeah, anyway, right now, before I forget, we're now going to go over to DalekSex, the new Holocaust contributor, who has recorded us a very special, rather mysterious piece of audio, Trials and Tribulations, or something like that. So I hope you enjoy it.
We are the Holocaust. I'm DalekSex, and you're listening to the voice of sex.
Yeah. Huh. Come on. He's got opinion. I'm posted suggestion, but never reveals his name. Read by someone, taken as a good one, but nobody knows who wrote it. Few lies of the
Trials Evolution came out this week. Now, Trials is an interesting one. It's a game which emphasizes speed above all else, but the player is only able to see a handful of meters in front of the bike, which gives no indication in many places as to whether taking a jump at full whack will result in clearing a jump, or overshooting the awaiting platform spectacularly and dropping into the rotating knives below. Trials is not a game which inspires carefree, happy frolics. While there is a high, some might say ludicrous level of skill involved, it also belongs squarely in the camp of games which houses 1989's Rick Dangerous. It's a game which makes the inside of your head resemble a school exercise book, complete with drawings of cocks in the margin, and usually ends up with the player hurling the joypad, the furniture, and the family pet at the screen, screeching, "Fuck you, game, you will be vanquished." Given then that the entries in the Trials franchise are horrible games for awful people with some kind of mental illness or personality disorder, their popularity has always been somewhat of a mystery to me. That is, until I was forced to take a step back from the series and admit that I, too, am just such an awful person with a screw loose in my brain casing. Yes, I have finished Resident Evil games using only the handgun. I have finished more than one iteration of Namco's Tower of Draga. In fact, I complained on more than one occasion that the version I was playing was too easy. Now, it's a beloved stereotype of the media that we gamers sit around slapping each other on the backs over achievements like this. It is not the case. Doing things like this does not make other gamers fear and respect you. It makes them smile nervously and start hiding the sharp cutlery, because you've crossed the line between having mad skills and being skilled and also completely mad. On a recent visit to see my girlfriend, I picked up a copy of Dragon's Lair from the bargain bins at Best Buy to play on her Wii while I was there. Now, she's not a gamer, but her ex is, and when she told them what I'd done, her ex asked her why I hate myself. And that's how I learned to stop worrying and love the Trials. There are too few games nowadays which encourage people like me, crippled by our own sense of self-importance and bloody-mindedness to the point that our mental health resembles a pretzel, to cut loose and embrace our inner mentalist. I've been playing Trials in the free time I have between sacrificing goats so that Super Meat Boy 2 will come out one day soon, and it hurts in a good way, like putting toothpaste on your willy. That's all from me, but don't forget to go to YouTube and check out the Trials Evo episode of The Achievement Hunter by Rooster Teeth. It made me laugh harder than any YouTube video has this year. Now that Rooster Teeth are riding high on the profits and fame of Red vs. Blue, they probably don't remember the material I wrote for them back in the 90s when they were internet gutter snipes with a blog. But that's alright, because I have a webcam in their toilet.
See, that's what we're dealing with here. We have contributors who put webcams in people's toilets. That's the quality that you only get with the Holocaust. So yeah, quick advert here for the Games Cast. They did do a huge shout out for me on last night's show, and it's just returning the favour. So yes, it's the Games Cast.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you some important news from the world of live chat shows. What to talk about video games? Chat show? Isn't it more of a podcast? It's not Jonathan Ross. You may not realise it, but you have missed the most awesome sauce show, What Talks About Video Games. Seriously, is awesome sauce even a word? Every Tuesday night at 9 PM, the Gamescast presents its unique blend of news and rants live via Spreaker.com, packed into 45 minutes of goodness. This is starting to sound like a coffee advert. We now return you to the Holocaust, because we mad too.
So there you go. Yes, that's the Games Cast. They go out every Tuesday night on Spreaker.com, and they like to hijack our saying of "we mad" because we all mad, as that advert goes. Yeah, so that, do go check those out as well. Right, board games done with. I haven't got that much long left. We've kind of ran off with board games. It's been quite a good show just talking about that. I should have just plugged the whole 45 minutes, half an hour of it. So no, the next bit is just a brief one. As well as being a gamer and a board gamer and a kind of fascinator of hats, I also really like a bit of stand-up comedy. And one of my favourite stand-ups of the recent years is Ross Noble, a northern comic who kind of moved to Australia. Then his house burnt down in wildfires. I love that. And he's just very good off the cuff kind of reactionary stuff to audiences. I went to see him live near my hometown and he picked me out along with a friend of mine because we were both portly blokes with beards. And he picked us out, saying we looked, because we were up on a balcony, we looked like Toby jugs on a shelf. And then from then on, it was always like, oh, what if you carried a fat person on your back, and every time you went to put food in your mouth, they ate the food, and you had a mouse come down to eat cheese and stuff. And it was all jokey, and I never took it that seriously, because you go to a stand-up show, you sit within view, you kind of go in wanting a bit of interaction. And unfortunately, in Australia recently, Leslie Roberts, her name was, took her son, 19-year-old son Luke, who's got cerebral palsy, sat at the front row, and he had a distinctive laugh, which apparently had a sort of a growl involved in it, and Ross Noble was caught out by it, commented on it, and then made jokes about it throughout the show. Now, here's the problem here. The mother then complained and said, oh, he's laughing at my son because, well, he's laughing at my son because he's got a disability. It's not funny. My husband went missing and we only found his glasses on a rock, you drongo, or something like that. And basically, he said, Ross Noble said, there was no offence caused. He obviously misunderstood the situation. Now, what was funny about the woman herself said, he was making jokes about disabilities earlier. We were laughing along with everybody else. We don't find that it's not funny, but when he starts talking to my son like that, and it was obviously that hypocrisy was so frustrating. And she didn't go to Ross Noble about it. She just went straight to the press, as these people often do. But I would say, actually, in terms of being an audience member, and I've worked with people with disabilities, so I'm not coming at this purely from like, oh, I'm on a high horse, I could talk about disabled people because I know what I'm talking about. But actually, sometimes it's nice to just react to people like they're just people, because that's all they are. You can have any number of struggles in your life, but sometimes you just want to be recognised as one of the crowd. And in that case, that's exactly what Ross Noble did. He didn't discriminate against a disabled person. He didn't laugh at their disability. He laughed at an aspect of their personality, which it could have been anybody has a funny laugh. There's a lot of stand-up shows you'll watch where somebody has an outrageous laugh and it will get mentioned. The fact that he has a disability is not at all relevant. And good on Ross Noble for not kind of backing down and apologising profusely to the point of actually kind of justifying what she was saying. So yeah, well done to Ross Noble there. And kind of a victory of sorts for disabled folks who just want to enjoy their comedy and not be picked on or ignored, because the other option would have been Ross Noble could have ignored everything that was going on at that part of the stage as if nothing was happening. And that, again, that's kind of ignoring somebody because of their disability. How you kind of say, I wouldn't dare not touch them, obviously, but, go to area. So, yeah, it's a difficult situation, I think, handled well by everybody but the parents, as per usual. So yeah, right, final plug for the show, because we are running low on time, is for Mature Gamer podcast. I mentioned them last week, so if you want to find out more about them, listen to last week's show. But do go over to their website. It's not the Mature Gamer UK website anymore. They've moved away from that. I think the address, if I check it right, is maturegamerpodcast.com. They've got a forum. They've got a very good podcast that's riding high on iTunes. And they're a good group of folks. So there you go. They haven't given me an advert to play, so I'll just say that. And yeah, that's the best way to be sometimes, isn't it? Just say it out loud.
We are the Holocaust, Witchfinder Generals on the Internet Ducking Stool.
Yeah, so that kind of wraps it up, really, folks. We've talked about board games, we've talked about stand-up comedians, we've had DalekSex coming in and kind of jumping in and talking about Trials HD and rubbing toothpaste on your willy and stuff like that. And it's been a good show. It's flowed really nicely. We haven't had that much of a technical issues, I hope. We did have the sound drop out for a couple of people, but that's the joy of live internet radio, folks. So thank you for getting involved. Thank you very, very, very much indeed. If you do want to get involved in the next show, I haven't picked the exact kind of theme for the show just yet, but as soon as I do, I will be going in. We're also going to do a confessions booth. We've had a great confession sent through. And, so we're going to be running on that. And, enjoy that. So we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bouncy gave a big yawn and settled down to sleep. And, of course, when Bouncy goes to sleep, all his friends go to sleep too. Nerf Derma and Scarred Star were just a pair of old bad trolls. DalekSex went back to playing with his organ, and even Bouncy himself was just an old cloth twat, baggy and a bit loose at the seams. But Emily loved him.